Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal Podcast. Our guest today is Benjamin Stover. Benjamin is the Chief Commercial Officer at AI MedConsult, a US-based AI company transforming patient engagement through human-centered scalable AI solutions.
Thanks, Krish.
Benjamin,
Appreciate you
thanks for
having
taking
me.
the time to chat. Before we get started, do you want to give a quick introduction
Sure.
about yourself and your
Happy to.
company to our audience?
AI Med Consult, we've built an artificial intelligence powered patient engagement platform. So, it's a series of different products that we've put together into a SaaS based platform that helps specifically at this point aesthetic surgery practices capture more revenue with less effort. So, there's a number of different ways that we've done that. But the key way is really our flagship, which is our AI consult tool, which really helps walk a patient through a full blown guided consult, helping them discover what are the right procedures for them, what are they interested in, what are their goals, and how does that map to what the provider can actually offer.
Okay, thank you. I just pulled it up quickly here so folks can definitely give that a look. So at this point, we can get into the topics that we want to talk about here. Two items, right? How to build AI products that actually deliver business value, and then AI's role in linking data, teams, and technology, right? So those two, I think I have an interest in learning about both those from you, Ben. So let's get started perhaps with the first one. How to build AI products that actually deliver business value. I think I know what that means, but can we take the converse of what that means and perhaps start the conversation there? In other words, building AI products that perhaps
Yeah,
don't
I
necessarily
think
deliver business value.
most products out there are trying to provide value in one way or another. So the title might be a bit of a misnomer, but I think it's really how much value can you provide versus the cost of your product. So I think there's a big push for AI across the board, whether it's from Googling now to specialist AIs, what we've built here. Really, the big, I think, difference for me are the generalists versus the specialists. So you've got ChatGPT, you've got Grok and Gemini and all those really fantastic general AI models. And then you've got companies that are building AI specialists to do specific tasks exceptionally well. I think value starts with that. It starts with identifying, what are the ultimate needs and goals of the product or service or the customer base, whatever you're trying to accomplish, and really seeing how can I leverage AI to build that. Um, the word AI is becoming prolific. I don't know if you're much into interoperability. I assume as an API based company, that's probably a word that's big for you. In a former life, I ran a small business for
Right.
Philips Healthcare, and it was our interoperability business. And I always used to say that interoperability is a very broad term. It's misused, it's overused, it's misunderstood. I think AI is kind of going to that same type of arena right now. I like to tell people artificial intelligence is almost becoming synonymous as like saying, do you have an employee? All right, that's great to say you have an employee. What are they doing? What are they helping with? What are they working on? So I think it starts really with identifying where are the areas that I can accelerate, where are the areas that I can help use AI not to replace people, but how to get more done with the resources you already have, including the people you already have, as a force multiplier. That's really the way that I think using AI to create high impact, high value solutions should be done.
Okay, thank you for that. And if you hear some clicks here, it's just me grabbing notes as quickly as I can. So you said a few different things
Yeah.
there. Let's unpack that one by one. You said the generalist versus the specialist, right? And you did give some examples of, most people I talk to, or I'm sure that you talk to, Ben, use AI in some way, form, or shape, right? So we live in a time and age where it's not so much a second and afterthought. It's very much part and parcel of what we are beginning to do. How much of what we use is literally where some of us end up making mistakes and make course corrections and then go from there. So can you talk a little bit more about the differences between the generalist approaches to the specialist? Because you mentioned ChatGPT and Gemini. Those are things that almost everybody is using on a daily basis. So we could start there, but if you could call out for some examples and differences. And when it comes to the specialist mention that you made there, you could take your product as an
Sure.
example as well
So
to
it
speak
all
more to.
depends. It's very context based, but I think for me, one of the easiest delineations of whether it's what I would call a generalist AI versus a specialist comes down to the knowledge library that the AI is pulling from. So you look at Grok as an example. I'm a big fan of theirs. I go back and forth between using that, their latest, greatest version versus GPT's latest, greatest version. their knowledge library is massive. It's pulling data from the internet. It has access to the internet. It can do Google searches for you. It can do all kinds of things. It's a huge knowledge library, and it's getting better and better at reducing the rate of hallucinations. But that still happens way more than I'm comfortable with. More and more, I find that I have to ask even the best models out there, the generalist models, these market leading ones. I have to ask the questions in a few different ways to ensure that it's really giving me responses from a source that I personally would find, you know, as an authority on that topic. The generalist AIs, they're pulling everywhere from WebMD to Reddit to blogs and everything in between. They are trying to push more and more towards, high quality, third party validated sources, but that's not always going to happen. So I think it's important to ask the AI, your generalist AI, whether it's GPT or Gemini or Grok or whoever you like to use, ask it for sources. Make sure you take the time to, optimize it for you. So when you ask it to make a list, tell it what you mean by that. For me, whenever I ask Grok to make me a list, I say I want it numbered. I want links, hyperlinks in each of the lines, and I want you to provide the sources for those. And so that's sort of the big difference, I think, between a generalist AI. A specialist, like what we've built, is sometimes referred to as a closed loop knowledge base. So it's a knowledge library or a set of data points that the AI has been trained on that is not connected to the broader world. It's specific to some purposes. There is some interesting overlap you can benefit from, and we do this ourselves as well. OpenAI is fantastic at offering free access to their back-end models, right? So we're able to kind of tap into what I would call as a non-technical person or not as technical person, tapping into the conversational ability of the latest models that OpenAI puts out, but using that within our specific knowledge library base. So we're getting better at conversation and all those kind of things, but we're able to stick to specifically the knowledge library that we've built. And we also have a bit of a secret sauce for how we go even deeper so that each of our customers, each of the practices that work with us, get a bespoke version of the AI for themselves. So we're within less than a week, we're able to train it on absolutely every procedure they do, the price points for those. If there's specific, a lot of providers have specific preferences for the type of equipment they use, specific lasers or types of, injectables. We're able to train it on those specific nuances very, very rapidly so that for the patients and for the customer that we serve, they really feel like this is an AI built for them, by them. So that's some of the bigger differences, I think, between generalists and specialists.
You made some great points there, ending with personalization there. So let's go through some of them to the extent that I've been able to make notes here, right? So, and maybe I'll ask for some examples as well. You can share to the extent that you can on the product that you own, that your business owns, or you can have a generalized answer as well. It's just entirely up to you. So let's say in no particular order, I'm just trying to digest everything that you said there. I'm going to ask you a bunch of random things. And again, feel free to chime in and interrupt me as well. Your product base, right? What your existing solution, Ben, at the 30,000 foot level, is that something you could have built, like say 2-3 years ago without AI, or does it fundamentally hinge on AI being available as a technology to get stuff done?
So the solution we've built itself is an AI solution. However, we also separately leverage AI to build that and to train that AI. So I think there's two parts to your question. I think yes, technically it is feasible. We did in fact build it 2 years ago. We started that journey at least. But we also are tapped into some pretty cutting edge AI engineers that are a part of our team and that are able to really have done what we did. But it absolutely accelerates that curve. Think in terms of either feature updates or knowledge base updates. When we're doing all of our development work for the software around our AI, right, we've got sort of our own backend and we've got our customer facing components of the AI that we do all kinds of development work and feature updates on. We can push out new features. I've seen coding happen within the matter of 30-40 minutes that probably would have taken a developer a day and a half to do without AI. And all of the QA and dev testing that happens after that, using AI to do that instead of having to have a team of 4 or 5 people, pressure test the tech. It's unbelievable how fast you can push out new products if you're using AI in the right way in-house, behind the curtain, let alone what you're doing, for your actual value proposition.
Okay, so two parts to what he said there, right? So there is a customer facing interface that you have, that your customers, patients, and your providers interact with, and you have your team building software for you to cater to those customers. So let's talk about the first part, the customer facing side of the product or the solution that you have right now. How much of that is AI driven, meaning when a customer is interacting with the product or the interface, are they interacting with a chat GPT like interface wherein they actually know and understand that this is an application that has been built very recently with that sort of user interface in mind? Or is that transparent to the end user, meaning they are interacting with it like they have done it in the past, but it's just how you do in the back end that you've changed the ways to actually
Yeah, I
building this
think
to make it more efficient?
the way that our customers, which would be patients in this in this realm, would interface with our AI, it might feel somewhat similar to how they would a chat GPT for certain elements of our product. We do have a chat based element that gets embedded in our customers websites and in their social media platforms, but it goes a step further beyond that. It also has a visual representation, a whole guided tour, so to speak, of different parts of the body. Where are you interested in, having some sort of a procedure done? What are your goals? So there's a visual element to walking them through that as well. And we've recently launched a voice version of it. So it's basically an AI powered patient engagement coordinator type role that can man the phones 24/7. And that has the same depth of knowledge base. And really its goal is to engage with the patients, answer their questions, move them forward, help them understand and identify their goals, and then get them into the practice, right? Get them in and get a really qualified patient who knows what they want and is qualified for the price points and the procedures and everything that they need to be qualified for to even move forward before any human has even had to touch that. So it's a little bit of both. Our AI doesn't try to hide that it's AI. It'll call itself whatever you want. If you had one, you might call yours Krish or Blake or whatever the practice wants to call them, and we can voice clone as well, so it can sound however you want, but it's not going to intentionally throw somebody off and say that's a real person. It will not volunteer it, but it's not going to hide it if you ask.
Okay. And then from what I understand, you have a B2B solution that you're selling it to other businesses, and then they have their own end users essentially, right? That's the integration. And then when you said a bespoke solution to each customer, you meant your business customer, right? You're making it sort of personalized to that customer, and then they use it the way they want to use it for their end users, right? That's the user interface side of things. You mentioned
the AI is basically built to represent their unique business, so their medical practice. So it knows everything about where they're located, how many surgeons, what procedures they do and don't do. It really goes in depth to understand specifics about your business.
Okay, and then on the other side, where your team is building this software, there's a few things I want to get into if we can, but to the extent you're able to share your technology stack, Ben, to our audience, it's predominantly an engineering audience here, so they'll be curious to know what are some of the tools that you're using to
tear
get
me to
this
pieces
done.
Because I'm not the tech guy. We should have said CCO is Chief Commercial Officer. So although I'm surrounded by engineers for most of my career, I can't give you a whole lot of details on the tools we're using. I can say that our AI is built in-house, so it's not built on top of ChatGPT or anything like that. We have our own bespoke AI that we built, and we've built on top of that then. So my dev team would certainly be able to tell you more about the actual interfaces that they're using. There's some sort of an online database that we've downloaded from. I believe it's some of it's open source and some of it's in-house designed. It's a combination of those.
Okay, fair enough. Let me ask you some things that are a little more high level, right? You mentioned that the ability to build features is very different from how it was before, and a lot of us recognize it and appreciate it as developers, right? So there's a few questions I have as somebody who's managing a team that is doing this. You mentioned features that can be built a whole lot faster. You mentioned something that took ballpark, paraphrasing what you said there, Ben, something that could have taken a day or two, which is quick enough already, right? It's not too slow. A day or two is good, which means your team is being efficient and breaking the stories down into smaller pieces so they're able to churn out in quick time. So kudos to you and your team already, because you're able to do them in that window of time. Because we are still, as much as things have progressed on one side of the world, by one side of the world I mean commercial versus government versus startups versus mid sizes versus one country versus another. I know that there are times where
Yeah.
teams take a lot longer to get stuff done. So you had a good benchmark already, which is not too long, a day and a half. But you said things can actually get done in 30, 40 minutes. Now, I think I would like to understand what that means, right? So does it mean that the exact same feature was able to be done that many times sooner, or did AI help sort of change the processes so things are actually getting done surely sooner, but it's not
Yeah.
necessarily apples to
I
apples
think
comparison?
it's more the former. We follow a version of what I'd call scaled agile framework. So we're going off sprints every couple of weeks and quarterly releases and all that. That's in theory what we do. But one of my co-founders is an absolute machine, and he and the way that he works and the way he runs our development team, they're pushing out features every week. It's so part of it is a philosophical culture that the rest of our leadership team has built, the product leadership team, and he's built and sold a number of tech companies. He ran $1 billion business for Cisco System back in the 90s and early 2000s when they were really hitting their stride. So he knows how to do that, and he's very good at finding the right people and getting them motivated and getting clean, beautiful code written quickly. But even taking that, the fact that you're now able to go in, I've sat in on some of these coding sessions, and it's all natural language based. It's asking your AI coder, to do XYZ, saying here's our current feature set. Here's the tweaks that we want to make to this piece of the functionality. Write me a code that does that, and use these coding languages, and then use this methodology for QA and test, and it does it. And so you can sit there and watch it writing this code live, and the initial batch, I'd say took it 3 minutes, maybe 2 minutes, and then it's a guided process. So then the let's call him the lead AI engineer in this instance, the guy who's kind of doing this process, looks at it and says, okay, well it's maybe 80% right. But to be able to get to 80, and getting that last 20 is a much more involved process. Maybe it takes them the rest of the day to tweak and make little things here and there. But to be able to get that for a small feature update, 80% done in 2 minutes is insane. I mean, that is a complete paradigm shift of what it means to code, what it means to build products. And in an ecosystem, in a world where so many value propositions are technological ones, I think it changes so much about competitive strategies, right? One of my co-founders, one of his, the reason his philosophy is to get things done so quickly is that he believes it's a competitive advantage for us to be able to push things out faster than the other guys. I believe that's true as well. But now you've got this new set of tools where everybody can do that, right? So is speed to value still the bottleneck? I doubt it. So I think those are some of the interesting sort of existential, exciting questions that this type of tech is bringing about.
Actually, you said something there which I was literally going to ask you, but before I go to the
Yeah.
competitive strategies and what it means, let me ask, do you know roughly what, first question is, do you know if your team is using Claude versus Codex? Do you know which models you are
I don't
using
know
to
which
do a
one
lot
they're
of this
using, to
code
be honest. If I
generation?
had to guess, it's the same baseline AI that we built off of, our own in-house AI. So
Okay.
we originally had a team that we worked with that had their own AI built. We then acquired the entire intellectual property of that to take it in-house. So it started off as a licensing agreement that we built IP on top of, and then we were lucky to be put in a nice position where we were able to acquire the whole thing. If I had to guess, they're using the same one. So yeah, I don't think it's external.
No, sure. Yep. And even if, everything that
Sure,
you're sharing here, Ben, we
sure.
appreciate it because it does help, right? I mean, all of these are learnings for everybody because our audience is folks who are just getting out of college to people who have done this for many years, like you and I, for instance, right? So I think definitely appreciate your answers there. But if they are
Yeah,
very specific,
I'll
feel
do
free,
my
we can
best.
just
Feel free
jump
to
into the next
try
set
to
of questions.
barrage me and compete.
Yeah, yep, yep. The next thing is, do you know roughly if you were to ballpark it, you said what could take a day or two, it takes a few minutes now. which means a lot of that code is surely generated now versus human written. That being said, right, what would the number be? It's an exciting number because different people say different numbers, and not it doesn't have to be precise. Would you say what percentage of your code today would you say is actually generated
Great
versus
question.
written by humans?
I don't know the exact number, but I think what I will pose in
If I said 90%, would you say,
no,
Krish, that's
no, I don't
preposterous?
think it's
Or would you
preposterous,
think that's
but I
no?
think what I would position also is more of a philosophical debate back is what's the difference between, obviously you doing it outright is one thing, right? You sitting there and writing it soup to nuts, that's one thing. But there is an art to this natural language based AI led coding where it's very much the individual facilitating the objectives, the end goals, what has to happen, and then coming back in and reviewing how the AI responds. So it's kind of like saying, what's the difference between you using a screwdriver versus a power drill, right? You know, what percentage of that is you versus the tool? I think it's all on how you use it and what you're trying to accomplish. So I'm circumventing your question a little bit because I don't have the exact answer. I think
Oh, no,
that's
no, that's fine.
interesting.
No, I think you told
Yeah.
me, you gave me a good idea there. You gave me a good idea. Let me give you
Yeah.
context to what why I'm asking that, right? I promise you, it was not just pulled out of thin air, but here's why I'm asking you, because as we build more software at Snowpel ourselves, Ben, and as I talk to more people like you who are business owners and leaders who are building software, there are a number of differences between what,
Yeah.
there are differences in what people tell me, but more than the differences, the commonalities in what people have been telling me has become bigger and broader. Like if I ask the same set of questions, I mean, I don't have a prepared set of questions. It's based on what the conversation is about. But that being said, if I'd hypothetically asked the same set of questions a year ago versus now, I can tell you that the
Yeah.
answers are becoming more normalized, if you will, right? The answers were very different a year ago, but not so much, which tells me that the community is marching ahead in unison to a large extent, right? We might be building different solutions, but there are things that we as engineers and software leaders agree upon, and things that we are still trying to iron out. And the reason I asked you that question was, let's say you had asked me a question back, which is a great question. What is the difference, right, between, let's say I have an agent write the code for me versus Krish having written the code? I'm sure there's a number of differences, but here's the one I want to focus on and ask your thoughts on, right? I talked to a founder, more than one actually recently, who had never written code, right? They were not programmers. They actually never hired a programmer, like at least a full-time programmer out of college, but they were able to build something, not just go up to prototyping, which a lot of people have been able to do, but there are people who have gone all the way through to production without actually hiring a full-time software developer and not being an engineering founder themselves. Now, if you'd asked me 3 years ago, 2 years ago, if this was possible, I'd have been like, no, Ben, you need a person like Krish or better than Krish to get stuff done. But that answer is changing by the minute. I have a few questions to ask there, but I want to get your initial thoughts on that, whatever I just shared
Yeah,
with you.
I think there's a lot to unpack in that. I think you're spot on that trend is correct, that more and more people are using that. I think it's also a bit of a, we're probably going to talk later about competitive strategy and how to approach that. But if you think about it from an ecosystem perspective, this is very much one of those moments where forced evolution is coming on us. If you don't adapt to use new tech like this, you're not going to be in the conversation. So maybe you're not doing it. So maybe there is a large cohort of folks that aren't using that new tool, that, they're not using the power tool instead of the screwdriver, but they're not going to be, yeah.
I was going to say hint Apple. Hint Apple. No, I'm just kidding. I was just going to
Hint, what
say
was it? Hint what?
Apple. Apple's been one of those companies that's been sitting out for the most part and even wanting to leverage Gemini,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah, for
we'll
sure.
come to that. Sorry, just
Exactly.
go ahead with your thoughts
So
there.
I think anybody who stands in the way of, or allows their belief structure to stand in the way of them taking advantage of a giant technological leap like this, it's like trying to fight against tides or trying to fight against, the weather. It's much better to figure out how to, rig up your sail properly to work with the wind rather than to fight it. So I think that's it's not surprising to me that you're hearing more and more people in the coding space are using those tools, because it's the way that it's going to go. It's the way of the future.
But Ben, is there a problem there? And here's what I mean by that, right? Now, as a developer, a lot of us as developers, people ask me, "Hey, Krish, what are you guys going to do
Yeah.
once AI is going to do all the job, right? I mean, do we need you anymore?" And my genuine answer to that is, as easy as it is to replace a developer
Mhm.
in a team, a software company, it's actually a lot easier to replace other roles in that same company, right? So before a developer is replaced, if you're a developer, you replacing almost every other role in your team using AI is going to be a lot quicker as well, right? So it kind of goes both ways from a development standpoint. That's what I tell people. The need for product managers, testers, UI, UX designers, that is a seismic
Yeah.
impact on all sides, essentially.
Yeah, I
I think,
absolutely
sorry,
agree
go
with
ahead.
you. I strongly believe that as AI becomes more and more prolific, as we get further and further down this path, this advancement in technology is going to change our economies more dramatically than the Industrial Revolution did its economy. Yeah, you think about the majority of, especially U.S. based economy, but really anything in the tech based world, you are globally. You're looking at most of the work being done by people is thought work. It's thought based work. It's not. I'm not grabbing the paintbrush and painting the walls. I'm coding. I'm writing emails. I'm engaging with patients. I'm thinking about how to draft a response to a lawsuit, whatever it is, right? Across the board, a lot of our economy is based on thought work, and AI is dramatically changing how we do that. So I don't know. I guess that's perhaps what some people refer to as a singularity is after that point when it becomes so prolific that we aren't as necessary for most of the tasks. What does that do to our economy? I have no idea. I'm an optimist. I'm a realist and an optimist. So I sit a little bit on that side. I think there have been many, many technological advances in human history. This is going to be the next one. It's going to be huge and it's going to change the way our economies work. So I don't know what that looks like, but that's my basic prediction.
And I think you're not too far off from what I'm hearing from almost everybody. But let's say, more people are able to build software now. You don't have to be a developer. You don't need a lot of money. You don't need a lot of the skills, which is great on one side
Yep.
because more software is
Yep.
going to be built. No questions asked. But do you ever worry, Ben, that we're going to end up in a world where there's plenty of software and systems that are sort of functioning? And I say sort of because a lot of this is generated and there's nothing wrong, right? Code that can be generated should be generated. A lot of us have been doing that forever, right? Not just with AI, but even before AI. But at the same time, when you run into issues, maybe in production, or maybe things that, do you worry that there could be a number of apps and systems and services that have been
Yep.
so quickly generated and built that people don't exactly have a good understanding of how it was even built? So when you have to fix a solution or scale it, extend it, and make it better, you're still at the mercy, quote unquote, of the tool that may have generated the code. Now we are beginning to stop thinking as humans, and our intellect is actually not playing a role here. Does that
I
cause
don't know
any
if
concern
it
for
doesn't
you?
keep me up at night, but it's certainly there's I think a trend that will some version of that will occur, right? Look at most people don't know how to read a map anymore. They just use GPS. They don't know. I sometimes when I had free time, I used to like to fly general aviation airplanes. They used a process called dead reckoning, which is how you identify where you're moving on a map based on real world um, milestones that you see out of the window of the airplane. Most people can't think about using a map anymore. They're just at the GPS. Did that make us weaker as people? I don't know. We get places more accurately, more quickly, and we're able to identify traffic issues ahead of time because we don't have to see the traffic. We're able to avoid those. So there are trade-offs. I think it's a trade-off. You could look at the internet as a whole. People don't visit libraries and read books as much anymore. I think I personally still like to read books. I think for the way I learn, the way I like to achieve synthesis, it's easier for me to do that with books and audiobooks. But there's also an argument to be said of whether or not rote memorization is even that important anymore versus focusing more cognitive ability on critical thinking and what do you actually do with data. So do you need to, like a physician, for instance, most physicians, a lot of what they do is memorizing tons and tons and tons of information. And then they're using that information to make the right call in a medical situation, right? That's what a huge chunk of their training comes down to. A lot of friends and colleagues are physicians. And what they would tell you they do. If you have all the information available to you at the quick, I can speak it. Let's say you get to a point where we have a bespoke medical AI that knows all those answers really well, which I think we're getting closer and closer to. What does the role of the human have? It changes. It doesn't become irrelevant, but it changes dramatically. I think maybe critical thinking and what you do with the data becomes more relevant at first, but then eventually that gets offloaded too. AI is getting smarter every single day, and it's getting smarter faster than we are because it's training itself to do that. And it doesn't need to eat or sleep. It doesn't have hobbies. It doesn't get in arguments with its kids or whatever. It's just doing this all day, every day. So yeah, I don't know what it's going to look like, and I don't know if it's a problem or not, but it's definitely going to be a change.
Okay, you talked about competitive positioning earlier, and you said more people can build. Between the things that both of us said, right? Things can be done faster, better, more efficiently, and more people can build it. Which means, let's say 10 years ago, I sold myself as a developer, meaning I can write code in a certain language at a certain pace, in a certain fashion, and that was a skill that Krish brought to the table. I mean, that may or may not be a skill anymore, because someone who's not Krish, who probably didn't go to college, didn't write as much code, can pretty much do the same thing with tools being assisted. Now, what does it mean when you go to the market, right? When you go to sell products and solutions, is it the functioning of those products? Because if everybody's relying on these tools, and let's say the models have become more, normalized to a large extent, that things are mostly equal, where do you see the competitive positioning come into play?
Again, I think going back to speed to value, whether that is still a competitive advantage is going to be put into question, or maybe just our paradigm for what is fast will change, which I'm personally okay with. I'm a bit of an impatient guy when it comes to updates, so I'm maybe looking forward to that one. But the fundamentals of what it means to win competitively aren't going to change. You have to have a large enough total addressable market. You have to have a value proposition that people need or want or are interested in, and they have to be willing to spend money on it for it to be considered a product. I always like to say that the only difference between a business and a hobby is revenue. If you have that, then it's going to continue to follow the same psychological consumers, psychology type rules that we think about when I do my work, which is developing competitive business strategies and marketing and sales campaigns to serve those strategies and to serve those customers. I don't think those will necessarily change, but I think the priorities of how we resource those parts of our businesses will probably change because of how quickly AI can do things. And you look at sales, for instance. I came up through my career in sales. Prospecting is one of the most monotonous, challenging, intense things a salesperson can do. You usually do mostly that when you first start your career. It's high failure rate. You're just bogged down constantly. More and more, there are companies out there that are building AI prospecting engines that do a lot of that for you. So what does that mean? I mean, there's entire roles, the entire entry level of and even beyond that. There's people who, from a career perspective, get incredibly good at that. And they do that their whole career and they make great money doing it. So whether you're at the entry level getting in, or you're that person that really knows how to build pipeline consistently in your career, that's going to change at some point. I don't know when. I don't know if it's next year or next 5 years or next 10 years, but probably it's going to happen faster than we think it does. So that will shake up, I think, how we look at capital allocation and resource planning from a strategic perspective to win customers. But the end goal is never going to change. You're going to win customers. And only so many value propositions can exist in one ecosystem, unless you want to just have hyper lean businesses where it might have taken you 50 people to address a market of a couple million customers. Maybe now you can build, you won't get a couple million customers because there's so many more competitors in your space, but maybe you only need 2 or 3 people to run that business now. So maybe it enables a more robust, a broader ecosystem of competitors, but with much smaller companies. So sort of triggering a lot more entrepreneurship. That's a possibility, but I don't know. A lot of the old tried and true competitive strategy models, like if you look at Boston Consulting Group and what Bruce Henderson did a lot of writing on, they had what they called the law of 3 and 4, that basically said that almost every market reaches equilibrium with approximately 4 main players, or I'm sorry, 3 main players, and then the market share is split up in a sequential way across those, with the main market leader getting most of it, and then the smallest one having about a quarter of that market leader's market share. So that dynamic 40, 50 years has remained relatively accurate for the most part in most markets and most global industries. Maybe that changes. I don't know. So it'll definitely shake things up.
A lot of great points there.
Sure.
Let's shift gears, if you will, to playing the devil's advocates for a bit. Both of us are in the business of building software. Now, I'm pretty sure from the sound of it, a lot of what you say I agree with, and perhaps it's the same when it comes to engineering, being more efficient and using AI. And I want to make it a little bit more difficult, if you will, Ben, and say the opposite of what we've been talking about so far. And I'll give you some examples personally as well. So as I start receiving emails, right, whether it's people wanting to talk about our business of APIs and whatnot, or say a podcast, for instance, right? Hey, Krish, I would like to hop on a Snowpal podcast. 6 months ago, the message was very personalized because I could tell a human was writing it, right? And it was 4 lines, and I could tell what they were. It was not always grammatically accurate. It didn't have beautiful vocabulary, but it didn't matter. I got the gist of what they were trying to do, and I just saw whether it made sense for me to have a conversation with them or otherwise. What's happened in the last 6 months? All messages have become almost equal. They all have been generated. I can guarantee that there's probably none of them are actually being written. I can tell, right? I know it's like how many lines it's generally going to be, what the tone is going to be, and I'm not necessarily convinced that it was one thing, it was not human written, but two, I just take it with a grain of salt, if you will, right? And then I do my own due diligence. That's one thing to keep in mind. Let me take another example. When I'm talking to, I don't know whether it's AT&T or some company where you're doing customer service, be it even the platform we're recording this podcast on, it's usually a number of questions. If I run into an issue with the video or the audio or the recording or the lip sync not working and whatnot, a technical issue, I have to go through a number of questions. Sure, AI, an agent there is asking me a bunch of questions. And, as personalized as it's trying to be, it's pretty mundane. And I know, and I keep saying, get me a human. And I say it 3 times and I get the human there, right? Now it's surely efficient for the company to do the filtering because they can hire fewer people. They can hire fewer people perhaps in the country. You don't have to be English speaking or anything like that, maybe, right? So it's probably you can go with economies of scale, go to different parts of the world, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and whatnot. So I can see why the companies are doing that. But that does not necessarily translate into better customer service for me, because when I go complain about the lip sync not working, if I get to the human customer service, not that they can resolve the problem in the first go, but I'm a little bit closer to solving the problem. Us going through press 1, press 2, press 3, a version of that, get me a human, is not boding for great customer service. And I'm going to come to Bill's applications and everything from there on. But I want to ask you, is there an undeniable negative side? It's not hunky-dory and all roses and everything when we talk
I think
AI
it
and
depends.
improvements?
The latter example you gave, I think is really also my experience with. Pick any large brand that you might do work with, right? Whether it's LinkedIn or Amazon or whatever, and you're now in the customer service. You're in the pipeline of thousands of customers per day that are trying to get some attention from them. That's frustrated me for years. I've never been happy with that. Even when I get a person, typically there's a very sequential set of steps and questions they have to ask. Look at your ISP, your internet service provider. When something goes wrong with the internet, how maddening that is. They can't get out of their loop of, did you power cycle the router yet? Like, yeah, I've had internet for 25 years. I know how to power cycle. Something else is wrong. So that's really frustrating. I think part of it is, a lot of these companies are still using pretty basic chatbots rather than dynamic, highly trained, intuitive artificial intelligence large language models. And so there's such a big range of impact. So I think a lot of what you're saying right now is just, these are not good solutions. These are not the right ones. And even with it, when it's still people, a lot of times you got to get to the second or third level manager before the thing that you're trying to debug is even possible to be talked about, right? It's just not standard process or whatever, things like that. So I think that AI will improve that kind of thing. I don't think it's great now. I don't think the solution's great, but it's going to take good AI. It's going to take very dynamic, highly trained, conversational, thoughtful AI that can do those things. But it also takes a choice. It's a cultural choice for the companies that are building and implementing those to give it an AI or a person, whoever it is, the latitude to really be able to critically problem solve if a problem presents itself that isn't part of the standard FAQs, right? So I think that's it. It all really depends on what the problem is and how the companies implement those types of tools.
Okay. As we come to do
Yeah,
you have another
yeah.
15 minutes before we wrap this up? Okay. Let's talk quickly consulting, right? What do you think is the impact on consulting? Now, I'll give you an example or set the context or bias your answer based on what I'm going to tell you here as an example. It's a random one, but I think it might be relevant. You know, you can make food in the house and you can eat it, right? You can eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, every single meal you could eat. So there is no real need for restaurants. If I play that argument, right, there's no need for restaurants. But in every country, for every dollar that's being spent, I don't know, in the US, it's like 50 or 60 cents is being spent outside. In other more conservative nations, conservative here, by conservative, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot more saving, right, not spending, which is changing across the globe. But even in countries where they did traditionally save more money, it was 30 cents to a dollar was being spent on eating outside. There's very few places, unless it's impoverished nations, where you probably had very much lower numbers. So the point I'm trying to make here, Ben, is you could make food, but you still went out to eat, perhaps for a number of different reasons. Maybe you want a good experience, you want to go out and have some fun, talk to friends and family, and
I
have
need to
better
get out of the
lights and
house
maybe
because
better
I've been
food
AI
sometimes,
coding all
right?
day and I'm
Sorry?
tired of being in this room. Yeah.
And you want to see a human, right? So restaurants did not cease to exist because food could be cooked at home. No matter how good your cooking ranges are, the stove is, people still eat out. Now I've heard two arguments to consulting. You know what? AI has made things cheaper, better, faster. Ben can build stuff in 30 minutes and not 2 days, which is fast enough already. So Ben does not need to ever hire a consultant or go work with a consulting organization. Or is there a second answer to it, which is, you know what? While you can do it, it still takes some time, some energy, some skill to maintain, manage, and build it. And that might not be your core business. So perhaps you might still resort to consulting as a way to build software, but maybe the nature of engagement might be different, but that business does not go away. And I want to get your thoughts on
Yeah.
it. And I'll just throw one more thing here, right? The Indian consulting companies, the really large ones, like a week and a half ago, after Claude released one of their models that had to deal with legal stuff and whatnot, I think they plunged over about a 10%, right? Like the Indian stock, the IT stock market, because you know what? A lot of money is made in
Yeah.
consulting and software exports. Now AI is going to negate a lot of those jobs. Then what happens to those companies? So I've thrown you some data, some accurate, perhaps some not so accurate. I want to get your thoughts on consulting as a business. Do you see
Yeah.
it gone?
And
Do you see it
I'm
exist? What are
gonna
your thoughts?
actively listen here to make sure I understand what you're asking because consulting is another one of those words like interoperability or AI. It can mean a lot of different things. So when you say consulting, are you saying staff aug type consulting work?
Yeah,
Yep, understood. Perfect. Yep.
managed
So
services.
so
Yep.
yeah, same story. It's that is a sign, I think, of one of the things that I mentioned that will happen earlier is that our economies are going to change in dramatic ways because of the efficiencies of AI. Um, I don't know. I don't know the answer to your question. To me, that is kind of the singularity. Does that mean that consulting is that type of staff aug kind of consulting is now irrelevant? No, not yet. Maybe it will be someday, but who knows, right? I still go to work with people, right? I still want to find the coder who's using AI to do the tools to be more efficient, to get things done faster, right? But I'm still interfacing with a person. So I think it doesn't negate or change the relevance of the value proposition, but it could change how many people are required to serve X number of customers for that same value proposition. So you either have to innovate and find ways to do more with those people, or yeah, you're going to need eventually less resources to do the same thing. Now I don't know with the instance that you mentioned if that was a panic move or if that was a necessary move. It sounded a little bit like a panic move to me, but um, yeah, it's absolutely going to change the way we think about capital and resource allocations, in particular human capital. For us, our team, I mean, I've built sales teams, for instance, and our product management development teams are about the size, maybe slightly smaller than what I was used to maybe 10 years ago. And we are getting a lot more done, but I still need those people, right? So I think it all really depends. I'm not sure. what it looks like.
What do you think is the composition of it? Well, how does the composition of an engineering team look like today compared to like maybe a couple of years ago? Like, let's say you had 3 developers, a tester, a DevOps engineer, a part-time product manager, a part-time a scrum master, your typical SDLC-ish roles that, you needed to get ship software out to the real world. How do you see that composition change? Are you seeing some roles completely disappear already? Are you seeing new roles come into play? How
There
are
are some new
you?
roles.
What
So
is your
like
experience there?
being able to, let's say it was SQL or Ruby on Rails, whatever. Like there were coders that were developers that were learning specific languages, getting good at specific things. Some of that's, maybe going to consolidate, I think. But, AI engineers, people that can actually build AI and tweak it and do what you have to do with it, that's becoming a more common thing. We have some awesome in-house developers, but they don't have experience building an AI. So it's, finding other resources who do that is what we've had to do. But I think there will be a consolidation of roles. Like, again, AI to me is a force multiplier. And if you just apply it specifically to the development world, the coding world, I think it means that one person is able to wear more hats more efficiently and get more done than they would have in the past.
Okay. So say Krish is a developer, say 20 years of engineering experience. Krish can use Claude and Codex and Copilot and all of that like anybody else as well, right? I'm talking in third person just because I don't think about a new name here. Let's say there is a Ben who has not necessarily been in the world of software. Not Ben, let me take George, right? George. Let's say George has been not in the world of engineering for like 20 years. Maybe George is getting out of college, maybe has done engineering or computer science, or maybe hasn't even done that. But George is just as comfortable using all of these AI tools to build software. Let's assume ceteris paribus conditions there. How much more would you be willing to pay Krish to fill that same role than you might
I
have to
pay
pay
for
George?
outcomes across the board, and I charge for outcomes, right? So I don't care how many hours you take to do a thing. I care about what that thing does. And same for us, our customers, right? We built a product that's going to get you an ROI for using it. It's not about how much time it takes us to implement or any of that kind of thing. It's about the outcome. So if the same two people can do the same thing, unless you intentionally want to work with the one person better, maybe I like you better, and there's a premium on that. Maybe the interactions I have with Krish are better than Josh because Josh is still kind of green and he doesn't, all the interpersonal stuff are not worth it. So maybe you could do the same things, but maybe I like Krish better, and that's very valuable. I think we talk about this all the time within our company. We can't just be tech. We have to be relationships and tech. So if a customer leaves us, I want them to feel like they've broken up with me. They've broken up with my team. They haven't just like gotten rid of a technology. So I think the human side of this thing, the relationship side, those unless I'm missing something in this whole singularity thing, I think relationships are still going to be a uniquely human experience. So I think that will still absolutely come into play. We work with whom we want to work with, whom we like, who we feel similar to. So I think you've got that going for you. But I would also say that just like in any trade, you think about any sort of skilled trade. My father was an aircraft mechanic, so I'll go there. You've got the younger guys that maybe have some new tools, some new techniques, and you've got the older guy that has older techniques, maybe older tools, but a lot more experience. They know how to use those tools better in different ways. I think if you can combine an experienced developer and their ability to see ahead or see around the curve of a problem, and then use that plus learning how to use these new tools of AI as good as that young green Josh, I think you're probably going to still be in a competitive advantage to win. Now, whether or not I'm going to pay you double, I don't know. Probably not. But I think it's all in how you position yourself as a resource and what else you're offering beyond just the specific value proposition, the specific code, whatever it is that you're trying to build for that customer.
Okay. Yeah, about 6 minutes ago, so I'm going to throw a bunch of questions and give you an opportunity to ask me anything as well. So if you could keep your answers as short as possible, Ben, so I can ask you the most here. So my questions are not short enough, so apologies there. So we talked about roles changing, AI making seismic impact. how does your hiring process change? In other words, 2 years ago, let's say you were looking for a Golang developer or a Python developer, you'd have had some algorithm questions that are generic and then more specific questions about Python. Today, do you care about the language that they have experience in,
I don't
or is
think I'm
that
the right person to
immaterial?
ask that because I'm not putting together the hiring for a developer specifically. I think it's probably still relevant, but I think how I analyze someone's, how they stack up against the what I would call KARs and KPIs, key performance indicators and key areas of responsibility. I'm able to do that a lot faster with AI as the hiring person, right? So I don't know the answer to the first part of your question, but the second part, how I actually hire, has definitely gotten faster.
Okay, and it doesn't have to be an engineering role. Let's say for any position, right? Are you looking for a college degree anymore? Or did you ever look for a
Depends on the
college degree and are
role.
you looking
It
for
really
one
depends
anymore?
on the role.
I mean, what would be a role that's not like a medical role where you need a certification or a lawyer there to pass the bar? Is there any role that you can think of in a software organization that actually requires or you think you might give more value to a college degree?
I think I have a preference. I think I still prefer to see that, but I also think I'm operating on an old OS, right? I have an old paradigm. So maybe I don't need to, but so far I have.
Okay. 4 minutes to go. I have a couple of more questions, but I want to give you an opportunity. Any questions that you
I
may
am
want to ask
curious.
me?
How are you using AI in your neck of the woods, and what have you seen has been the impact on your business in particular as AI has become more and more advanced?
The impact is every which way possible on all sides. When you as a startup, as a business, you build a product, you take it to market, things are changing while you take it to market. And then when you take it to
Yeah,
market, things have changed quite a bit already. AI is only made things, it's helped in one way or many ways, but it's also added challenges in many other ways, for instance. But here's how our thought processes have
yeah.
changed seismically. Our approach to building software has does not look anything like it has in the past, right? I mean, we are a company that's built a lot of products over the years, and we are small enough, so we are agile and we move things, change our ways quickly. But even having said that, anytime we do something that gives us a feel of a muscle memory. I've said this more than once on the podcast, but I tell again here, it freaks me out, right? We're like, what if you're doing anything like we've done in the past, that something is not right, it's amiss, right? So we want to change our approach right from how you take your requirements to conceptualize them, to communicate those requirements from business to engineering team. Everything is going to has begun to look 180 degrees different, right? You're not talking requirements written in English coming from a non-engineering team to a developer. Now you're talking about 70% of the code already being generated by the team that does not even write code before it comes to the developer, right? So that interaction has already changed. And that's the very starting point. And if that has changed, so the developer gets 70% of the code, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, at least you don't have to look at documents which none of us want to look at. You're looking at functioning code. You have a place to start. But the downsides being all of this code is generated, which again, if you want to fix bugs and you're contributing to that code base as well. So being able to tell the separation between human written code and generated code is actually key to maintaining software. I don't know if all the teams have figured that out, and I can see where there could be pitfalls there. So it's the fine balance of how you can do things better. So you're building software like you should be doing it in 2026. At the same time, how do you not stop thinking? Because, part of your competitive advantage is the intellect that each of us is born with, right? In the interest of AI and Claude and Codex, what I think each of us personally, I don't want to lose is whether I'm smart or not smart is a topic for another day, right? But whatever that intelligence is, I want to make sure I can continue to use all of it and don't delegate some of it to a tool or an agent, because now I'm already given up hope thinking the agent is better than me in every which way possible. While in some cases it could be true, I'm not generally
That
convinced
is
that
there. Yeah.
it's the truth in all cases, right? At least that, yeah. Hopefully some
No, it
part of
did.
that
I'll
ramble made some
one
sense there.
follow
Yeah.
up kind of question to that. If you were to compare the experience of what it's like to do all that, everything that you've said about, writing code now and seeing what's AI generated versus human generated, do you feel a sense that more and more the type of work you do is more like sculpting than it is working with clay, meaning it's more about a removing process? It's like, okay, you've started with this thing. I don't like this part. That's garbage, whatever. Getting rid of that thing that was there versus from the ground up, taking a mold and trying to build it into something. Is that the way you've?
You know, you asked me a very difficult question. It's a brilliant question. I'm going to answer it to the best of my ability. And the best of my ability means the truth, literally, as I know it, right? That doesn't mean it's the right answer.
Yeah.
It's just my answer with my experience. Now, part of it is exactly what you said there, right? I'm never going to paraphrase what you said and say it better than you did, Ben. So I'm going to say the first part of what you said, sculpting, spot on. That is what it is the case, or at least that's the aim and the intention. But here is the problem. I'll tell you where the problem is. Now, we've come to a point where, again, with calculators, right? Years ago, I grew up learning mental math. So a lot of my thought process now is I don't rely on a calculator to tell me what is 1.37% of $445, right? I don't get the exact number, but the ballpark, I feel like it's going to take me longer to rely on the calculator than I could do it myself,
Okay.
right? So keep that in mind for a second, and I'll give you this answer. Now, when you start sculpting and relying on all of these tools to building it, imagine a team of 6 developers using one set of models or different set of models, because developers have varying preferences, right? We never agree on something
Right.
unless it's pushed top down from management, right? You got to use this tool, and then you're unhappy and you're complaining, right? So there's no win-win here. So let's say you're using a bunch of models and tools and IDEs to help you write your code. Now, you're going to have AI agents make sure that the code that's being committed is consistent, right? It's got these lint checks and whatnot. Now, there are things that need to happen. Then ultimately, there's a code that becomes production quality, and then you make some tweaks and adjustments, and you're doing prompt engineering all along, right? Create something, make it better, tweak it, make it better, and the model gets better at understanding you. You get better at understanding how to use it. So on paper, it looks like it's a perfect world. But I think there is a problem here. Each of us has stopped thinking. I can promise you, based on my experience, when people are prompting as developers or anybody else asking questions, it's almost like the email that I mentioned to you, right? You're never giving it a first attempt at writing it yourself because you're like, you know what, the tool can do better than me. But sometimes you forget that the person reading that email clearly gives more respect. Maybe some of us give more respect to the 3-line, poorly worded, grammatically incorrect English email than the AI generated ChatGPT 2 paragraphs, right? So when you go to fixing this code and maintaining this code, let's say the developer who generated this code left, right? So you have a bunch of checks and balances, so things are all right. But if you have 6 developers in a team working there for a few years and you understood them and they understood you, fixing that problem in production between the team because you're working together,
Yeah.
I feel like would have been a lot easier than using a lot of code generation tools. That not to take away from agents and how these tools can do it better, but I think there's got to be a fine balance. And what that balance is the gray area, right? And the gray area is thin in some cases and pretty wide in some other companies where they have absolutely no developers, right? Or they have 1 developer to 10 non-developers. How you maintain that balance and the quality of what's being generated and put out there in the world, we'll know 2 years from today. There's going to be a lot more entrepreneurs and there's going to be a lot more products, because you go to any conference, almost everybody is a founder now. But I know, having done that more than once, there's challenges to that. So I'm not exactly sure. One side of it seems promising. The other side is, let's not stop thinking as humans, because maybe we should continue thinking and use these tools to better ourselves, not become stupid
Yeah, no,
relying
I
on
agree.
these tools, right? If that makes sense.
In Grok the other day, I found a fascinating, there's a setting for how it responds to you. And one of the options is Socratic. So it's designed to help you. The way it responds is designed to help you think more, right? So that's one example of, because I agree. There's the idiocracy side of the equation where we just get dumber and dumber and dumber, and we stop knowing how to exist. And then there's a side where I think we use it as a way to force multiply how we learn. I've even known, and you've seen it in myself in the last year, of how I prompt. I've gotten better at asking questions, and that translates to questions of people. It's helped me be more clear and concise in how I draft a question, and that gives me a much better outcome on the AI's response. Same as with a human. If I've been more thoughtful about generating there's a whole book about this called A More Beautiful Question. I think if you get better and better at doing that, there's a lot of wonderful things that happen from it. So that's one side of the coin. I hope that's the side that we stay on, or that most people gravitate towards. But there is certainly the other.
I'll just add one more thing to what you said, right? A completely parallel example, if you will. I'm a huge fan of Quentin Tarantino, and I've watched all of his movies like not more than once. I would say like tens of times, right?
Okay.
The Hateful Eight is one I've watched like I don't know,
Yeah,
20
yeah,
times, right? I love Samuel L. Jackson, for instance. So let's say Inglorious Bastards or
yeah,
Django Unchained or any of
yeah.
those movies, correct? Any of those movies. There are, I mean, I hear AI is going to get creative and do this, do that, right? Now, I trust that AI is going to get better at creating a lot of these videos and content and whatnot. And you can ask AI to have Robert De Niro or DiCaprio play the role of somebody else in this movie, and it's not Christoph Waltz, and create some content like Nolan or Tarantino. And it might go there and do something, but you still have got to give all those references. I want an actor like Samuel L. Jackson. I want an actor like DiCaprio. I want a writer like Tarantino. I want a cinematographer or a composer like Hans Zimmer, for instance, right? I'm giving you all these prompts and sort of telling you what you should give me. By virtue of doing that, I have already killed the creativity here, right? The day I see a video that AI generates, doesn't have to be a 2 hour, 3 hour long movie. If I watch a 30-second video that I've genuinely enjoyed, then I would worry about, oh my God, what's going to happen to the
Yeah.
Quentin Tarantinos and the Clint Eastwoods, right? But till then, you're like, you know what? Yep, I think it's all right, but it
Yeah.
hasn't
It's not.
amused me yet, right? Or it hasn't done it. So I think a developer can get replaced a lot sooner, I hope, than someone like Quentin Tarantino or Christoph Waltz, for instance, right? That's just my personal hope
Yeah, I
to
mean it's
humanity, if
true. I
you
mean
will.
part of what cinematography is art, right? So think of it in any form of art. Um, do we love the art because of how it makes us feel, or because of the fact that a human designed it? I think it's a little bit of both, right? We have here where I'm based in St. Petersburg, one of the largest
Absolutely.
Salvador Dali museums in the world, and being able to go and see Dali, a lot of the experience is, what does that make me feel? What does that remind me of? And if the content's good enough, that's going to happen regardless. But there's also a connection to the author. There's a connection to the artist. You think about Tarantino. I mean, he's as good as he is. You watch some of his interviews. He's been a student of the game since he was a child, and he's still a student of the game. You see him talking about how he was basically just clean slating his local video store and watching every single thing that they had, right? So that's a knowledge library. That's a guy that went in and saw all and was analytical to look at, okay, the difference in camera angles and lighting and sound and the integration of all those different elements together and how the people show their emotions in those environments. That's what makes him so great. Can AI do that someday? Probably. Does that make the value of a person doing it less? I don't know. I think it comes down to, what do you really value, right? I mean, there's all kinds of hilarious short form AI generated videos. You know it's AI, but it still makes you chuckle. Is that the same as watching a comedian for an hour, like Dave Chappelle? Watching him for an hour doing his thing. I still like that a lot better. But yeah,
I know. And if I could afford the $350 per ticket,
there
I
you
would
go.
be watching Trevor Noah
Yeah,
in like DC this evening, actually. A couple of final things. Ben, you mentioned St. Petersburg, but I want to
no,
say not
no, not Russia.
Russia, right? Somewhere in the
It's
US. No.
St. Petersburg, Florida, which is
Okay.
in the Tampa area, so Gulf side.
I know. Yeah, Clearwater, Tampa, and St. Petersburg, right? Okay, got it. Super. So my final question before I'm going to have you,
Sure.
probably have your closing comments here is, what's your favorite dish? Like if you have to
Food.
pick one dish that you like to eat, like,
Oh
the
man,
most favorite, what's
I
that?
don't know if my fiance's in earshot. I should probably choose something that she makes for me. My favorite dish, I am a bit of a food nut, foodie. I like a lot of different things, but I probably would have to say the one thing I wouldn't be able to live without is a really great hamburger. I mean, you have the right burger done well. It's
Okay.
a really wonderful experience.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much, Ben. It was wonderful talking to you. Any closing
No,
comments
Krish, I
before
really
we call it
appreciate
done
the
here?
thoughtful questions and the conversation. Thank you so much for having me. I am curious, I guess, what is your favorite food? I'd love to hear.
I'm going to give you a 2-minute answer. Hopefully, you have the time because brevity is not my forte. I was born and raised in India, but I came here when I was rather young. I mean, it's many decades ago. My wife is Indian, but she's from Malaysia. So Malaysia has got
Yeah,
an ethnically diverse population. They've got the Malay people, the locals, the Chinese, and the Indian people. Yeah, I had not tried a lot of Chinese food. I did try some when I was here, and not as much. In the last many years of being married, that's all we've been eating Chinese. We were vegetarian, but so we're picky in what we do go out and eat. but it's a lot of Chinese food. And when she cooks, it's a mix of Indian and Chinese, but it's not Indian Chinese. I don't know if you've heard of the Indian
No.
Chinese cuisine. If you've not, I'll just educate you for 2 minutes and
Okay.
promise to not laugh here because you'll end up offending like a billion people. No, I'm just kidding. So I took my wife to India. She's been there a couple of times, and I said, I love Indian Chinese. And then she grew up eating a lot of Chinese food in Malaysia. So she was very excited to eat that. So I go there. We go to this popular Indian Chinese place from Chennai, the place I come from, the southern part of
No, I
India.
haven't.
Have you been to India, Ben? Okay, I'll give you a few places you can go. And if you do
Would love
visit,
to.
you should go to my part of the world as well. It's a beautiful state, Tamil Nadu. So Chennai, right? I was born and raised there. So I take her to this place. We have a great dinner. The place was called Mainland China. We get out. And then I asked her, hey, Meena, how was the food? She goes, it was good. I mean, it was good, but I just have a question for you, right? Yeah, what is the question? Why do you call this Chinese? Like, I see that you call it's popular cuisine in India. It's called Indian Chinese. I was like, what do you mean it's Chinese? She goes, no, this is not Chinese at all.
Uh-huh.
And then when I went to Malaysia, and then I'm like, wow, this has nothing
Sure.
to do with what I was eating in India, right? So as it turns out, Ben, I think this is very interesting. I don't know the exact history behind it, but the northeast of India, which is very close to China, people moved to different parts of India from there, and then they started cooking for food with different flavors. So someone created this, and it probably the most popular cuisine
Yeah.
in India, like the Indian Chinese. But it's pretty much Indian, right? You can't if you try this next time,
Sure.
don't go there expecting Chinese
Sure.
food. Just go there expecting Indian food with some Chinese flavors, if you will, right? Some sauces and noodles and stuff like that. So that's a popular cuisine. I like that, but my favorite food, I'll tell you one thing, is it's called idlis, right? It's rice cakes. It's like white
Mhm.
circular things that are steamed. It's South Indian food essentially. It's had for breakfast predominantly. It's called idli and dosa, right? Two different things. One is a crepe,
Okay.
and the other one is like the rice cakes. And you eat that with a lot of different Indian chutneys, right? Like, you can get the spicy ones or the non-spicy ones. Yeah, if a lot of the Indian restaurants that you're generally going to here happen to be like North Indian restaurants, but India is a very diverse country with food that's completely
Sure.
different between one state to the other. So what I'm talking about here is like
Very regional.
very much South Indian food, South Indian breakfast, regional, and a billion of the crepes that I mentioned, a billion of them are made every day, right? So you wouldn't go wrong trying them. So the next time you're in St. Petersburg, just look for a South Indian restaurant, or maybe a vegetarian restaurant or something that generally makes this.
Perfect. Yeah, I
And
would
then
love it.
maybe
Sounds
maybe you'll
delicious.
enjoy
And
this.
it's very similar. I imagine the same dynamic that we have is Americanized Chinese food is very different than Chinese food. Very different.
Very different. I love
Yeah.
Chinese food in the US because I'm used to it. I go to Malaysia, that's too authentic for me. I'm like, give me the Americanized Chinese. That's
I'm
all
basic.
I know. I can't
Give
do
me some
anymore.
General Tso's chicken and a bunch of white rice, and I'm pretty happy.
It's funny you should say that. I asked one of my friends who works at a Chinese restaurant, is there a General Tso's chicken in China? He goes, no, we don't have
That sounds
one in
about
China,
right.
I think. But this is amazing. Again, I'm going to, Ben, just hang on after we are done here, right? Thank you so much, Benjamin
you.
Stover, for taking the time to chat. Ben is the Chief Commercial Officer at AI Med Consult, a US-based AI company. We'll include the link to Ben's LinkedIn profile and AIMED Consult, AIMEDCONSULT.com on the podcast, so folks can definitely check this out. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you so
Ben.
much,
Much
Krish. Appreciate you.
appreciate your time here.